away.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Just while you're getting your various bits of technical equipment ready, I'll just run through the format. I'm George Candler, an officer at Shropshire Council. What we're going to do first, we're going to get the panel to introduce themselves so that you know who they are and their roles. Then each member of the panel is going to say a few words, beginning with Councillor Keith Barrow, leader of Shropshire Council. At the end of that, we'll then have 30 minutes for question and answers, which we'll take in an orderly fashion through myself, and I'll direct those to the panel unless there's a specific person that you've got a question aimed at. So we'll allow 30 minutes for questions and answers, and then we're happy to do one-to-one interviews thereafter. So that's the broad format for this afternoon. Obviously, when we go into the question and answer session, if you just state who you are, where you're from, again, just so that the panel are aware of that, that would be much appreciated. Okay, so without further ado, I'll ask the panel to introduce themselves, beginning with Councillor Keith Barrow.
Hi, I'm Councillor Keith Barrow, I'm the leader of Shropshire Council.
I'm Clive Bright, I'm the Chief Executive of Shropshire Council.
Good afternoon, I'm David Jenkins and I led this inquiry.
Good afternoon, I'm John Williamson, I am the Head of Operations for Crematorium Care.
Okay, and we'll start with Councillor Keith Barrow.
Thank you. I think my role, what I'd like to start off by saying, is maybe to set the scene on how we came to get to where we are. And it actually started one morning when I was at home listening to the radio, and I heard Glenn, and I was so moved with what I heard. I rang you up and we had a conversation, and we fixed up a meeting, and I met with Glenn, and I must be honest, this was an issue that I never even thought would be an issue. It's something I knew nothing about, and it was a complete shock to me. But we talked things through, and I didn't really know what would be required of myself and Shropshire Council. And through that conversation, Glenn, it came out that an inquiry would be the best way to handle it, a public inquiry, and I agreed to do that straight away. At that conclusion of the meeting, we agreed to do a public inquiry, and we then went away, and it did take some time. We wanted to make sure that we got the right people or the right person to lead the inquiry, and we ended up with David. The trouble for me with this whole thing was it was always going to be incredibly difficult to get resolution, and I don't think that's possible. But I think what we've done by having the inquiry is a starting point, because it seems to me this isn't just an issue about Shropshire or about Morton Hall. It's an issue that's a national issue, and I personally see this as a starting point, and I hope that we can continue to press and raise this as a national issue, because I think it's that important. I'd like to publicly thank David and his team for the work they've done. I think the report takes some reading. I've read it twice, and I'm going to have to read it probably a couple more times to take everything in, but I think you've done an excellent job, and I'm really pleased we asked you to do it. I don't think we found anyone better. And at that point, I think I will finish my introduction, but just to say to Glenn, because I sort of met you and I know you, I know you better than anyone else. I can't imagine how you feel, and I can't imagine this is going to be resolution for you, but I hope you see we try to do our best, to at least find out what's happened and to raise it as an issue, which hopefully now will get national attention. And if any good can come out of it in the wider context, I think that would be what I would want to see. And if there's anything I can do to help you and the group you represent, just come and see me, and I'll do whatever I can.
Quite right.
Thank you. On behalf of Shropshire Council, I'd like to offer my sympathy and sincere apologies to the bereaved families for the distress that they've suffered following the cremation of their baby or child at Emstrey Crematorium in Shrewsbury. As the leader said, Shropshire Council agreed to commission an independent inquiry into infant cremations at Emstrey Crematorium just over 12 months ago, at the request of the bereaved parents. I particularly wish to mention those families who contributed to this inquiry. There can surely be nothing worse than losing a child, and I'm sure that reliving their painful experiences has not been easy. I realise that the past year has been very difficult for these families, and I wish to thank them for their cooperation in this inquiry and for their contribution to the report. Their involvement has helped the inquiry team to understand and learn from their experience. Again, as the leader has said, I believe that David Jenkins leading the inquiry and John Doyle assisting him have been the right team to deliver the results that the inquiry has concluded. I'd like to thank David and John for their hard work, for the professional and sensitive way in which they conducted the inquiry, and I thank them too for their thorough and very detailed report. I'd also like to thank everyone who has contributed to the inquiry and helped David and John to complete their report and draw their conclusions. This includes current and former council and crematorium employees, industrial experts, government officials, funeral directors and many more people involved. We note that the report makes clear that the practices carried out at Emstrey Crematorium in the period covered by the inquiry were in accordance with the law and with the requirements of the crematorium's environmental permit, and that crematorium staff were acting appropriately and legally at all times. The report makes clear that the failure to return ashes is an historic rather than a current issue. Following the installation of new equipment and the adoption of different cremation techniques by the current operator of the crematorium, ashes have been recovered in all infant cremations since January 2013. However, the report conclusions make it clear that there are a number of lessons to be learned, and I can promise that we will do so. The report makes some important recommendations. Some are local and some are national. I will now be working with my council colleagues, representatives from the Cooperative Funeral Care as the current operator of Emstrey Crematorium, councillors and others to carefully consider the Shropshire-specific recommendations and their implementation. We will provide regular progress updates. We will also follow with interest the progress that the government makes towards adoption of our national recommendations. And we will now speak with the families, representatives from the Cooperative Funeral Care, and other relevant organisations to ask their views on a suitable memorial or memorial service. Once again, thank you to David and John for conducting a thorough inquiry, and to all of you who've contributed to the report. Thank you.
Could I just add something I've got to say? I should have thanked Nick Southall and the BBC Shropshire, because I think it was a very brave thing that they did to take this issue on. And I personally am very glad you did, and I just wanted to publicly say thank you, for raising this issue, because it's something we would never have known about if you hadn't have done that. So well done, Nick.
Okay, we'll hand over to David Jenkins.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, last November, Shropshire Council asked me to lead an inquiry into the way in which infant cremations have been carried out at the Emstrey Crematorium in Shrewsbury. I began work in December and have, as you've already heard, have been ably supported throughout by John Doyle, an independent research assistant who is sitting here today at the back. The terms of reference set by the Council are set out in paragraph 1.6 of the report. We were asked to review the policies, practices and procedures adopted by Emstrey Crematorium and partners over the last 15 years in relation to infant cremations. Infant cremations were defined, for the purposes of this inquiry, as cremations of fetuses of more than 24 weeks and of infants of up to 12 months. We examined the cremation register held at the crematorium for that period from the 1st of January 2000 to the 31st of December 2014. John Doyle worked through more than 26,000 cremation records, and we established that there had been 57 infant cremations within our terms of reference over that 15-year period. We included a further 2 infant cremations which were outside the age criteria of our terms of reference, but which parents particularly asked us to examine, making 59 cases in all. Of these 59 infant cremations, 53 were conducted between 2000 and 2013. Ashes were not recovered from any child of less than a year old during this period, except for one who was cremated in the same coffin as a parent who tragically had died at the same time. At the end of 2012, the cremation equipment and cremation techniques used at Emstrey were changed. There have been 6 infant cremations between January 2013 and December 2014. Ashes have been recovered from all 6 of these cremations and returned to the funeral director. The issue of ashes not being returned to families after infant cremations at Emstrey is therefore, as you already heard, an historic rather than a current issue. There can surely be no more painful experience than losing one's infant child. John Doyle and I have met with 9 bereaved families and corresponded with a 10th. These families have carefully and vividly explained to us how their awful sense of emptiness after losing their child felt all the more desolate for having had no ashes returned to them after the cremation. They feel strongly that to have had ashes returned to them as a tangible memory of their lost child would have helped them through their grieving. I'm most grateful to the families for having been prepared to relive the distress of their experiences by telling us about them. They have made clear that they have done so in order to help ensure that other bereaved families are not left without their own child's ashes as they have been. We've also met with a wide range of other people and received written submissions from a number of organisations. We've examined records and we've considered the reports that were published last year from 2 Scottish inquiries into issues similar to those that we have examined in Shrewsbury. We have investigated why it became the norm that ashes were not recovered from infant cremations at Emstrey. The reasons concern the nature and condition of the cremation equipment that was used, the impact of the regulatory regime governing emissions from the crematorium into the air, and possibly the cremation techniques that were used too. My terms of reference asked me to make recommendations, and I have made 12. 5 of these concern arrangements at Shropshire. Some of the issues that were identified, it seems to me, call for a national response, and I have therefore made 7 recommendations concerning national legislation and practice. There is considerable overlap between my recommendations and those of the 2 Scottish reports. But finally, I would like to thank all those who have helped John Doyle and me undertake this investigation but particularly, once again, the bereaved families who have been prepared to relive their experiences with us in order to try to help others.
Finally, John Williams.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As I've already said, I'm Head of Operations for the Cooperative Funeral Care. We manage Emstrey Crematorium on behalf of Shropshire Council, and we took over responsibility for that in late 2011. Before I address the detail of the inquiry report itself, I'd like to extend our sympathies to those families who have been affected by circumstances at Emstrey. We recognise that any death, but particularly that of a baby, is an incredibly painful experience, and I'd like to offer my personal condolences to all concerned. As I said, we took over management of Emstrey Crematorium in late 2011. Our priority at that point was to invest in upgrading the existing facilities and the commission equipment at Emstrey. It was a significant upgrade. Plans were approved in early 2012, the work commenced in March 2012 and was completed by the end of that year. In the interim period, before the new equipment and processes were introduced, there were 4 infant cremations for which ashes were not paid. And to these 4 families, I would like to offer my personal apologies. Following the introduction of the new equipment and processes, ashes have been recovered in all infant cremations since January 2013. As outlined by the inquiry, the failure to return ashes is historic rather than current, and we believe that the local community can have confidence in the service at Emstrey Crematorium today. Our number 1 priority is always the interests and feelings of those families that we serve, and to that end, we adopted the guidance put forward by both of the Scottish inquiries in 2014. We believe that the recommendations made in today's report will serve as a further step to a consistent national approach to infant cremation. Our focus now is to work with Shropshire Council to progress the recommendations outlined in today's report. Thank you.
Okay, that concludes the statements from the panel. We'll now go into question and answer session. As I say, if you can just put your hand up, say who you are, where you're from, that would be helpful to the panel, and then we'll go from there. So yes, sir, gentleman at the back.
Yeah, it's Phil Hackney from BBC News. I was just going to ask David and the others as well. You talk about this being a national issue. In the report, you mentioned that only 8 crematoriums, I think in England and Wales, have specific facilities for infant cremation. So does that mean that in all the others, this same problem may well have arisen, and that there may be other cases like at Emstrey and in Edinburgh as well, which have gone undiscovered so far?
There may be other crematoria where the same issues apply. I don't think it's the case that they will apply in all crematoria where there are not specifically infant cremators, because there are techniques that can be used, and those techniques are now used at Emstrey in full-scale cremators designed for adult cremations, where the processes can be made gentler and at a lower temperature in the main cremation chamber, so that ashes are preserved.
But given what happened here in Shrewsbury, it could easily have happened elsewhere, simply because reading the report it's clear that different practices weren't shared because there's no national training and no national standards.
Yes, I say in my conclusions that I think that the issues that we have identified in Emstrey are not just Shropshire specific, but are national issues. I am concerned that there does not appear to be a national and authoritative code of practice on how infant cremations should be conducted.
I know that Simon Hughes, who was the Justice Minister obviously before the election, suggested that the creation of an inspectorate crematorium would be a good idea. You recommended it again here.
Yes.
And you said that you would follow that up. How sure are you, amongst all of you there, whether the government is committed to this and how quickly it might happen? Keith, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I would be shocked if this isn't happening all over the country. And we must do something, because one of the reasons we started down this route was to try to make things different, to make sure it wasn't going to continue happening. And I've told that we'll work with him. I've spoken to the MP of Shrewsbury down at Kaczynski. He's supportive. He can get and see the Minister, but I think we must all work together to try to get this raised as a national issue, because it's happened in Shrewsbury, and other places. So I'm certainly going to happen in other places across the country.
Okay, Nick?
Yeah, Nick Southall from BBC Radio Shropshire. A question for David, first of all. We are in contact with families in Hull and Sheffield with the same situation. Would you then welcome a national inquiry or a national investigation team so families elsewhere have somewhere to go to, somebody to look into their cases?
Well, I've recommended in the report that there should be a national inspector at Crematorium. The Cremation Act has been on the statute book since 1902, and in that Act Parliament envisaged the inspection of crematoria, but it hasn't happened in England. There is now an inspector in Scotland. I think there should be one in England, and I think that inspector's powers should include considering complaints from people about individual cremations, so that people can receive an investigation and a response quickly. There have now been 3 reports in the last 2 years on the issue, the very sensitive and difficult issue of child cremations, 2 in Scotland and 1 in Shropshire. I'm not sure that the issue is that more investigation is needed. I think now the issues between those 3 reports are fairly clear. I think governmental action to address the issues we've identified is now needed.
During your investigation then, did it become clear that up to 1996 the crematorium was getting remains and then suddenly it stopped? Was this point ever raised to senior council officials?
As I say in the report, until recently, I don't think there has been a significant focus on the issue of child cremations. And I don't think that applies simply in Shropshire. I think it's a national issue. I mean, one needs to remember that vital though this issue is, and crucially important to the families affected, it's a very small proportion of the number of cremations that are carried out overall. And I think that the issue has suffered from a lack of real and purposeful focus.
But nevertheless, staff were used to getting ashes, maybe Keith, and then it stopped overnight. So surely somebody at that time from Shrewsbury and Acton Borough Council should have said something's going wrong here and we need to sort it out.
It's very difficult for me to comment. Shropshire Council only came into existence in 2009. So what happened before? We just weren't there. It didn't exist. And I'm pleased is the wrong word, but when it was raised with us, we took action. We agreed to inquire, we sat down and talked to as many parents as wanted to talk to us. And we tried to, as soon as it was made known to us, then you know that you sat in the interviews, and we tried to act appropriately. And it was always it's for the people in this room who have lost children, who I can't imagine how you feel. I just can't imagine. You won't try to. But the only way I see good can come out of this, if good is possible, is that we make it different for people going forward. So that's why I'm quite keen to drive the whole thing of maybe a national inquiry, certainly an inspector of crematoriums. Other places that have cremations should be looking at their practices and making sure that this doesn't happen in the future. You can't change the past, but you can make sure that other people don't have to suffer how you've suffered. And that's, for me, that's what we're trying to do. And that's why hopefully the inquiry can be a starting point, not a finishing point.
David, just one last question. Is it your conclusion then that the most likely outcome with the remains is that they got lost in the cremation process, ended up with the fly ash, and then that of course has to be strewn in the garden of remembrance? Is that the most likely outcome?
People have asked, understandably, where are the ashes as a result of the cremation? I think the answer is that there weren't any. I don't think they predominantly formed part of the fly ash. They have been incinerated, and any residue has gone into the air.
Okay, any other questions from